Hi, I'm Roy Rubin from R Squared Ventures. And I'm panicked about the pace of transformation with AI.
Knut!
Hey, Howard.
No banter today. We have a guest in the studio.
I know, it's so nice.
Roy Rubin.
Hey.
Hey.
Hey, Roy.
Roy's visiting for the day. He's coming to, I would say we're doing a little Q&A with the community, some of the Jewish community here in town. So he flew in today and I said, let's make it a podcast.
Awesome.
Roy was with me on our, I would say it's a boys trip.
Yeah.
We just got back from, this will be our banter before we start, but we
All
just
right.
got back from south of France.
Oh, you were down there too? That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Roy was there because he
Right.
sized up the crew and realized he could beat everybody every day. And he did.
That's awesome.
But yeah, Roy's a beast on the cycle. How old are you?
I am 47.
So he does have, I do have 10 years on him. Watching me grind, what would be the biggest surprise? Knowing the goofiness and then seeing me on a bike, what would be the biggest surprise?
So I got to tell you, Howard, day 5 of riding, I'm hitting it pretty hard in one of the climbs. This was a climb going out of Vence in the south of France.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back and I see Howard. And I did not expect that. So you did very, very well that day.
Yeah, that was a
and you
beast.
came right behind me, and that was awesome.
Yeah, that was a beast. When did you get into cycling?
So I got into cycling around 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Road biking, that is. Maybe a few years before for mountain biking.
Yeah.
But it's been transformative for me. I really do believe it's changed my life, and I really enjoy it. It got me outside, which I always love to be, and got me to meet wonderful people along the way.
Yeah, so we were introduced by Jeremy Jonker, and Jeremy was... How did you know Jeremy?
Jeremy and I knew each other from our time at PayPal.
Right.
So after I sold Magento, I spent some time at PayPal. He also knew well my partner at R Squared, Roy Ayres.
Okay.
So we were, very much in the same circles.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into the history. You've been on with Roy. R Squared Ventures is the name of your firm. So we'll get into as much as we can in a short a period of time. But Magento, it was fun. Like, I don't know. I think I wrote about it, but I'm not sure if you read it. We were riding with the founders of, or the founder, I guess, of one of the founders of Café du Cycliste, which is a French fashion cycling business, right?
Yep.
E-commerce company. And they were, of course, ahead of me, but I was sniffing from behind. I like to just, it's so funny, Knut, because I'm like, are they pushing hard? Like, I never ride at the front because I just don't want anybody to see the pain that so I'm always like 10 yards back, 30 yards back. And it just depends on their pace, how far back I fall. But I never, if they're not, I don't ask questions. If people are pushing, I'm hoping they're pushing as hard as they can. That way it feels like I'm staying up. But I always know they're not. But anyway, so I'm riding behind and we're going up a hill and I'm just trying not to fall off my bike. And you guys are chatting, you and the designer guy. I don't think he's a founder. What was his name?
I think Olivier?
Yeah, so you're talking to Olivier.
Yeah.
And total Frenchman. And talking about e-commerce. And these guys, I don't even think they want to ride with us, right? We're there, we're a customer. Distance is a company that we invested in together, which is a cycling marketplace, high-end apparel. And Café du Cycliste is on the site.
Oh, okay.
Their products are on the site. So they think we're a bunch of American schmendricks, which we are. So they've prejudged us. I felt like being an ugly, because, they just didn't even want to be there, even though we're nice guys.
How un-French of them.
Yeah, so maybe you have a different take. But anyways, they probably didn't want to be there. But Filippo, who organized our trip, is the most friendly Italian guy. And he got them all to ride with us. It was part of the joy of these trips is we're with the natives. And this native, I hear them talking, and all of a sudden, they're an e-commerce company. So Magento came up in the conversation, which is powering. You could just hear the conversation change when the mic drops that he's the Magento founder. And so what was that like? So he's talking. Is it nice when that happens?
It's nice.
Because I happen to just be the fly on the wall behind you guys. And all of a sudden, the tone of the thing changed, and he's probably drilling down and asking you questions. So what does that feel like years after the fact when someone's still using the product? Because that is great. Listen, as a founder of StockTwits, we have millions of users. It's fun to randomly hear someone say they use the product.
Look, it's always wonderful to hear that people are using the product. And I really have countless stories of businesses that, were built on Magento, grew, thrived. But the entire ecosystem, it's not just the merchants, it's the service providers, it's all those people that Magento has impacted over the years. It's been, really exciting to keep tabs of it and just understand the impact that the product has had across the world. Even last night, I got a text from a community manager that used to work for me. His name is Ben Marks, and Ben now works for a competitor. And
when a competitor, you mean Shopify?
No, actually a company out of Germany.
Okay.
And Ben texted me a photo of a group of people in a bar in Romania. Turns out that there was a Magento event in Romania last night, and they all got together to talk about Magento. So Ben texted me and said to me, here's a photo that shows that your product is still very much loved by so many out there.
Yeah.
So, look, it's always great to see it, and I've had just the opportunity to meet incredible people over the years that Magento's made an impact in their life, and it's always great.
What does Magento mean?
It's the funniest story. So I was trying to figure out...
3-syllable words, probably not great.
Well, I was trying to find out a name, really kind of, go through the process of naming this product. And at the time, we had a services company named Varian. It was a services company focusing 2006, roughly that timeline. And we had been providing services in e-commerce for many years by then. And the color of the logo was the color magenta. And it took us months to figure out a name until I literally just wrote on the whiteboard the word magenta, crossed over the A and added the O, and that's the entire Magento story.
And it was available for $10?
It was available, it wasn't available for many years. It was magentocommerce.com.
Huh. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and we ended up buying it. The domain expired. We could never get in touch with the owner. It was not in use, and there was very little Google search results for it. So eventually the domain expired and we were able to buy it. But it's as simple as that. We just gave up on naming and decided to use Magento, which was the best thing we could think of at the time.
Huh. And so it didn't mean anything with e-commerce or anything?
Nope. No.
And if you were to do it today, is name important? Like, as you think, because our square is you, Roy, and Roy, so it's cute.
Right.
I always think about StockTwits and go, I never thought 15 years later, 17 years, it'd still be my company, so I didn't think much of the name if you were to start another company today. I got
to tell you, I think that there is a good enough sort of line there. I don't think it matters all that much. I think if the product is great and the service is fantastic, then people tend to remember the name. Unless it's something horrible and definitely stands out for some reason. But, we were under the premise, by the way, the logo, the same thing. I never loved the logo, right? But I wanted to move forward and not focus on, things that I believed at the time weren't that meaningful as far as projecting what the success may be. So the name, the logo were good enough. I moved on and we, had bigger problems to go solve, which were to continue honing in on the product.
You're born where?
I was born in Israel, right, but I moved to the States when I was 9.
Right. And then you went back to do military.
Yeah, when I was 18, I had a little crisis, identity crisis. Am I Israeli? Am I American? And I decided to go back and serve in the military for 3 years.
And so did your wife?
My wife separately did the same. We were friends back then. Yeah. We knew each other.
Yeah. And now your parents moved back and are there?
My parents, when I was 18, said, you're not going to do this on your own. We're coming with you. And they also moved back, and they're still there.
And you come back to the U.S. to school, and what was the inclination with e-commerce? Because, you were a geek.
So I wasn't a geek. I was a computer guy in the military. I served in a combat unit, but I did have a little bit of a touch to computers. And when I left, my father helped me get a job at Microsoft in Israel. I was just a support person. I was doing this on the side while going to college in Israel.
Right. So you were like 21?
I was 21, yep. And I was just doing technical support for, at the time, Windows 3.11. Yeah, if you remember those days. Windows 95 came out.
I was probably calling. I was like, what? How do you, what?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, we were still doing, at the time Windows 95 came out, and we were still doing installations with the 3.11 floppy disks, if you remember.
Hours and hours, I do. You don't forget things.
The small ones, by the way, not the big ones.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then I moved back to the States, went to college here in the States, and didn't really have any money. So, needed to make some money to pay rent, and started to pick up some programming skills on the side.
Where would you learn that?
Yeah, so
can't learn it online.
You go to Barnes & Noble and Borders at the time, which is not existing now, and you'd pick up a big, thick book about HTML and JavaScript. And that's how I learned to program. My language of choice was Perl, if you remember. And that's how I got started. But at the time, I was kind of doing everything. I was doing content management. I was doing, just websites, forms, all this kind of stuff. And I started to play with e-commerce. And I thought that there was something there. I read an article in a magazine that said, hey, to be successful in business, you have to focus. And I looked at everything that I was doing at the time, and I said, well, if I have to focus, I should focus on e-commerce because that's the real growing part of the market that was so fresh and new. So I downloaded an open source e-commerce tool that was available then, and I started to tinker with it and learn. And that was the start of my e-commerce journey.
So it was grabbing open source yourself that led to the open source idea of Magento?
Oh, yes. So for me, what was accessible at the time, I couldn't really afford any software. So open source was really the way to go. And downloading that open source package, that had quite a following in the market by then already, really provided an opportunity to go build a business around it. And I was fortunate that Google Ads just came out, and I would place an ad for keywords like open source e-commerce services, and I'd get enough business for 6 months within a couple of days. I'd shut off the ad, and I scaled that to about 30 people.
Hang on. So you would just explain to me, because I still don't know how to do this. So you would be selling your service.
It was a services business. So merchants who were offline at the time called and said, we're interested in coming online. What do we do? How do we do it? And that's the types of services that we provided.
And so when did the switch do to make it more... Well, obviously Magento was that type of product. You always had services were built around it.
Well, Magento came out of our growth as a services company and reaching a limit to what the existing open source technologies at the time were able to provide.
Got it.
And we felt like we could build something new. Now, being part of the open source community for so many years in the e-commerce space, we knew that there were some gaps as far as a modern open source technology stack. And we could build for that and really solve problems for merchants, for this next generation of merchants that we felt were coming online.
When did you know then Magento was going to be a thing?
So relatively early on, because what happened was we shifted from services to product, and we literally fired all of our service customers because I knew that I can't do both, right? Because if you're trying to do both at the same time, you are sharing resources, and that's never a good thing when you're trying to build product. You really need to be focused on the task at hand. So when
eventually, wouldn't these services people just be able to build their own businesses on top of Magento?
Yeah. So eventually, there was a very successful ecosystem that was built on top of it. But at the time, I needed to focus, and I moved basically all of my service engineers into building product for Magento.
Got it.
And what I found is that I'm really not doing anything, and I'm not productive. And I was really bored, right? Because all these guys were sitting and coding, and I'm just trying to find what to do with myself throughout the day. So what I started to do is actually share what's happening behind the scenes. And I launched a blog and I took videos. This was pre-YouTube. This was very early on. I'd used my Canon Pocket, digital camera.
You're a camera buff.
Yeah.
I mean, we're riding and there's pictures of me all over the place. And I'm like, what? I can't even stay on my bike. I get nervous getting water out of my thing when I put my head down. He's firing off one-click shots with his. So you were a buff then.
Yeah. So I was just, I was showing folks what we were doing through blog posts and sharing wireframes.
Like on WordPress or just on Google Blogger?
I guess WordPress. I think it was WordPress. We were sharing, a lot of what we were doing behind the scenes, and I was interviewing the engineers. And my goal was to do about 3 to 4 blog posts every single day.
Wow.
Which is hard because you have to find content. But that was what I was doing for a good few months. But what started to happen very early on, we were building in the open before that was even a thing.
Right.
What started to really happen is we'd start to get hundreds of comments for every single post. And people would start to talk about giving us feedback and sharing how commerce was done in different parts of the world and really educating us on what we need to think about as we're building the product. So when I started to really get a sense that there was a lot of interest for it, it all really started with the blog comments and the community we built around that. I knew that there was a lot of demand for a product like this. And it was just phenomenal because the night that we launched, we made the open source package available. Remember, this is pre-cloud.
Right.
Our delivery to our
customers. So you would have to leave it where on a server somewhere?
We delivered a zip file. That was Magento, ultimately, right? It's crazy to think in the cloud world today that those years existed, but we just basically gave out a link to a zip file. But when that happened, I remember we were up until 2 or 3 in the morning, and we worked very hard. The team was exceptional, and we put in, many, many hours, all through the night, oftentimes to make sure that we hit the deadlines that we promised the community we'd hit. And it was just incredible to see that first day because we were getting hammered with downloads.
Right.
It was beautiful.
Yeah. Did you ever, I can't remember, you didn't raise VC money, or you raised a little bit?
No, at the time we did not raise any money. This was 2000. So when we released the beta version, it was 2007. It was all bootstrapped.
There's plenty of VC money.
There was, but I was this kid in LA, and I didn't really know any VCs at the time, to be honest. And I never really thought about raising. So I started to get inbound after the product.
Is it because open source wasn't thought to have a business model, or
at the time it did? At the time, there were a few successful companies around 2007, 2008. Sun acquired MySQL for $1 billion. I think that was the big moment that saw open source, really begin to sort of be on the map. But there were a few venture-backed open source companies under a commercial open source model.
Right.
And that's really the key, the commercial open source model, which we were obviously, coming to market with. And it took off, and I started to get some inbound after, but the company was bootstrapped up until 2009 when PayPal called. And
was it Elon or Peter that called? Or they were already owned by eBay?
Sorry, who are those guys?
Yeah. Elon who?
Well, PayPal was introduced to us by
But
VC.
were they already owned by eBay?
They were owned by eBay.
Yep.
Scott Thompson was running it.
Right.
And Scott and I met, and they ultimately invested in the company.
Oh, they invested first.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this is 2008, 2009.
The market was crashing.
It was just, the great financial crisis. We thought that, life would come to an end. Magento had, at the time, about 3 months of runway. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Because when we launched the product, it was free and open source. So we had a thriving product with a lot of demand. But it took us about 12 to 18 months to kind of settle down on a revenue model.
Got it.
And a business case for it.
Yeah. And so they come in and they put in some capital.
They put in some capital.
Did you have any inkling that they would want to buy it?
Well, Scott told me. I'll tell you what Scott told me. Scott told me, I want to buy this, but my team is going to fuck it up. So I'm not going to buy it.
Quite prescient.
We'll invest, and you do what you do.
Yeah.
And he was great. And we...
Where's he now?
I don't know, actually. So Scott...
he had a good run.
He had a good run, and he left for Yahoo, and that was a short thing.
Bad career move.
Yeah, and then Shoprunner. He worked for Michael Rubin
the
for
one
a
with
few
the
years.
fake resume? No. Who had the fake resume at Yahoo?
Alleged. I don't know the details, but I
Was
think
it
you're
him?
right. Yeah, it's him. Yeah.
But good guy.
Good guy.
And so he does the investment, buggers off, and then so how does the deal happen?
So, well, the deal closed before he left.
Okay, so he closed the deal.
He closed the deal. This was right after the GSI acquisition, which was a big acquisition.
Wow, GSI Commerce?
Yeah.
What's
Michael
the name?
Rubin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a small world, man.
Yeah.
Rubin has been doing this forever, but so have you.
Yeah. So Michael, he was running GSI from Philadelphia.
Yep.
And I flew over to Philadelphia to meet him because at the time...
I mean, he's younger than you maybe still. No,
I think he's a little bit older.
Okay. When I had met him, he was like a 17-year-old wonder kid.
Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. So I flew over to meet Michael right when we got started. I think GSI was looking for...
That was a great company.
Product. It was a very interesting company. A lot of services bundled with product. But we got to meet the GSI team early on, and we loved them. And then we ended up being together at eBay, which brought us even closer. In fact, we
eBay's
were
murderers row. Oh, you were going to say?
No, I'm saying in fact we were under the same division, the eBay Enterprise division. So there was a lot of commingling over time between GSI and Magento.
So there was murderers row of entrepreneurs at eBay. Is that moment in time when eBay, just because of commerce, they just had all the smart people? Or was it just because that's the only real business that was on the internet at the time? What was it that was in the water that it was just so many gone on to do other great things?
I think eBay at the time, eBay and PayPal at the time were making, a series of acquisitions.
Yeah, because they bought Rent.com, luckily, I was an investor
That was before. So there was a period of time where they brought in a number of us. David Marcus sold Zong roughly around that time.
What was that
called? Zong, I believe.
Oh, okay.
GSI was acquired. Magento was acquired. Jack
PayPal
Abraham
was acquired.
Well, that was well before.
Yeah.
But there was a moment in
Jack
time.
Abraham was,
He came in as well with Milo, if I'm not mistaken. That was
a smaller acquisition, but he was so young.
Chris Dixon came in at the time as well.
Hunch.
I can't remember the name.
Yeah.
But there was a whole bunch of really smart, entrepreneurs at eBay around 2010,
so what would
2011.
everybody just sit around and go, why are we here? Would everybody just sit around and come up with other ideas? Because everyone has gone on to do
I mean, I wish that was the case. I think, we came in and it was not the easiest of, integrations.
Right.
But, ultimately there was a ton of talent on the team.
Yeah.
And, it was an exciting time to be part of it.
So now the cool part, I don't know if we can talk about it. So then you get a call. You leave, or do you get a call from private equity?
No, so I leave, and this is 2014.
This is the coolest part, when you do things twice.
Yeah.
Same company.
So I leave, and I take a year and a half off. I just literally...
Right. That's when you travel.
I travel. I take my kids out of school, and I'm gone now for 14 months just traveling, because I really needed to disconnect.
Yeah.
It was a long haul for me. And I come back, and at the time, eBay, there's chatter about eBay spinning off PayPal, and also the eBay Enterprise division, which is now Magento, GSI, and some other assets that they've acquired.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a call from a private equity company which tries to buy this group of eBay Enterprise solutions, and they're not successful. But another private equity company, Primera Capital, was successful and acquired Magento. And Mark Lavelle, who was running Magento at the time, ultimately leads.
Did you bring in Lavelle?
No, Lavelle was
an
the
eBay
head.
guy?
He was an eBay guy. He was one of the founders of Bill Me Later.
Wow.
And he led M&A for eBay.
Yep.
And then ran Magento for a period of time.
Yep.
And then when the private equity company Primera acquired Magento, he led the company now as a private company.
Yeah.
And Mark called me and said, "Hey, I think it's, I'd love to see you back on the board."
Wow.
And that's when I came back.
So you come back to the board. How long did it take to then reboot it? Not reboot it because it's still growing. Because like I said, we were in France a couple of weeks ago and people were talking Magento. So you buy it back. Was it cool to take it back from eBay? Was it friendly in that sense?
Yeah, no, it was very friendly. And it's super cool because I'm a product guy,
Yeah.
and sitting on the board, what I really cared about is just continued innovation. And Magento has its history and its roots in open source and in on-premise. I was very excited to help the team transition out to the cloud.
Yeah.
And I have a lot, at the time, I had a lot of thoughts. I still do a lot of thoughts about what the cloud means for this, type of a solution.
Yeah.
And I was, trying to work with the board and the team to get us there.
When was the first time you heard the word Shopify?
So Shopify.
Do you remember where you were, or did you dismiss it immediately, or did they nail it from the beginning? I can't remember.
No, it took Shopify
That's
many
what I
years.
remember, because they were Canadian. It took many years. It was under the radar even as a public company.
So, I don't know exactly when they started, but, all through the period that Magento was really climbing very, very quickly, Shopify was nowhere to be found. It was a little ant, in comparison to what Magento was in the market.
But they were cloud-based.
They were multi-tenant based from very early on.
Okay.
But they really catered to the smallest of merchants. I mean, just tiny merchants. For many years, I remember they did not have user accounts. So every time you checked out, you needed to put in all your details over and over again.
Wow.
That was in the early days.
Wow.
Magento gets acquired in 2011. We are now trying to figure out... First time.
Oh, first time. Sorry. Yep.
And we're trying to figure out how to work with eBay. eBay at the time had a developer platform strategy with X.com, actually, believe it or not. So we're busy, and there's a big transformation to the cloud, which I think was the tailwind, us coming out of the market, and the movement to the cloud that happened around that timeline was really the tailwind that they needed to kind of accelerate and press on the gas. And they've been just doing an incredible job since.
Wow. So now how long did it take from you buying it back then to getting acquired by Adobe?
So it was acquired, I believe, in 2016. I came on the board a few months later, and the acquisition happened in 2018. So about 2 years, I would say.
Yeah, and so you sold it the first time for $300-400 million?
Never disclosed.
Okay. Damn, we tried. And then the second time, what did Adobe pay? Is that disclosed? High one?
I think it was, high ones.
Did Adobe want you to come on ever or no?
No. I never had a relationship with Adobe at the time.
Okay. And so today, how big is Magento, do you think? And has Adobe, do you think, done a good job?
I mean, it sounds like it. I mean, Adobe has invested in the product. I think they've, done a great job in integrating it with its product line.
Does it make sense that they own it?
I think so. I really, I think so. I've been out of the loop now for, I would say,
If you think of Adobe, you think Creative Cloud. So what does Magento have to do with that? It's more e-commerce.
Creative Cloud is one business that Adobe has. They have the analytics business with Omniture.
The marketing, I guess. And
marketing and content. So they, they're definitely playing across the entire spectrum of, creative to, to marketing and content and now commerce. So it does make, a lot of sense. The question is it really in their DNA?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I guess.
So who's the customer today? There's Café de Cyclist using. So who's the customer today? You tell me it's more European.
So the customer, I mean, it's an interesting mix because of the roots of open source, right? Starting at the SMB now really have moved, last 10 years up market to the enterprise. It's really anyone and everyone still. I think the fair question is, who is the customer today given the success of the cloud?
Yeah.
Shopify. Okay. And I think it's those businesses that have some very unique requirements that make it very difficult for them to really live in a multi-tenant.
Give me one example.
So, deep integration into ERPs and order management systems that require, today there's a lot of APIs, of course, by pretty much everybody out there.
That's just a fancy word.
But for many years, you couldn't really, get the data in and out as easily. And you had some custom needs around the front end as well. So, for example, if you had some really, sophisticated customization capabilities for products that you listed, et cetera, these are things that would be more difficult to do in a multi-tenant environment. Today, the multi-tenant platforms, Shopify and the others, are much more sophisticated. So I think they offer, a plethora of services that weren't existing sort of back in the day. But Magento historically has succeeded where there were requirements that were a bit out of the box, right? That's what Magento was really strong at.
So you never took VC money, but now you're a VC. So I became a VC because the knuckleheads I did a deal with one time on Golf Now, Knut, and I was like, well, if that idiot can be a VC, then I should be a VC. So you didn't know the idiots. So what made you?
Well, I knew the idiots somewhat, I have to say, because
I was leading you to not say idiots, but it is great that you did.
We had a few term sheets, right? For Magento over the years from VCs.
Yeah.
We did not choose to take them, but we had, obviously gone through some processes, and went through this game. So we do have that experience.
Yeah, you have the experience. So what makes you come off the bench? You take listen, very few people could do what you did. To take your kids and travel around the world, which is a miracle. It's a fucking miracle.
Yeah,
because most people in this country are like, okay, we got to save for retirement, and then they're too old to do anything. That's been the biggest lie of the last generation, brought on by Schwab. And, they're selling you a formula. Follow the formula. The pot of gold at the end is your retirement money. Oh, but by the way, you have cancer. And, oh, by the way, you're fat and you have to go on a cruise.
But I got to tell
you're going to get COVID.
I was always a contrarian because for me, once we sold the company and I spent my time, at eBay, when I left, I said, what is the purpose of, having this opportunity to now do whatever it is that I want? Yeah. And a lot of my colleagues and friends, just went back into the rabbit race, right? They went back into building companies and being an entrepreneur. And I said, I don't really know my family. Here's an opportunity that I have to do something different. I've always done something different across my life.
Mm-hmm. Can you be sure it's your family since you didn't know them? Well, did you take the right family?
We did a DNA check.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
So anyway, so you had this chance. Yeah.
So, I just said, what? I'm not going to go through this rabbit race. I'm good with what I have, and I'm very happy. And I have an opportunity now to, spend this time again with, the family that I've just been so busy for all these years. And I've traveled extensively and I just was never home. And I said, what's important to me in life? And it was my family. And I just said, I have to do this and I have to stop with this rat race. Although opportunities came to me, really interesting opportunities came to me all throughout this time. I just said, I'm out. I'm not playing this game. So that's a bit contrarian, I feel, because a lot of folks just go right back at it. And to me, it's a bit irrational, I have to say.
It's a bit irrational when you go to south of France, you see that nobody works. And when I mean nobody, I mean nobody. And you just don't see them upset about anything. I'm sure they are. They're French, but they don't seem upset. I don't get it, the American way in many ways. And maybe I'm just lucky that I see the world through that lens. But I feel so many more people inspired by like me doing my trips. And I'm like, guys, you should do it. You don't have to spend like I spent.
Amen to that, I have to say. People, always look and say, I wish that was me. And they have the means to do it. It's just a matter of priority in life.
Just leave.
Yeah.
But anyways, people can't. I don't know. All you can do is is live your life. So now you come back full circle. Let's talk quickly. I just want to do this. At least we set a base because you guys were both on the last time and I've met your partner.
Yep.
But this now at least sets a base to have further conversations down the road about the future because you are tapped in. You are you're connected, meaning you're not always online, but whenever I see you interact with technology, I go, fuck, I'm an idiot. Why do I even bother? I just talk to Roy or talk to Yoni. I know who to talk to. So how do you stay so connected? What are the products that matter to you?
Look, I read a ton, right? So, and I consume content. I'm an avid consumer of content. So, for me, Twitter still is, I have to say, a great source of content. Tons of podcasts. I listen all the time.
Really?
I force myself to listen because I think there's so much knowledge out there.
There really is.
I wonder what's going to happen now, and I don't have an answer for this, but I just wonder with AI.
Yeah.
Because I actually, my problem is there's not enough hours in the day to consume the content.
Right.
Especially in podcasts, which is
right.
It takes
I consume 3 regularly. They're all comedy, and I don't have the time.
I wonder if we can start to get this in an aggregated, abbreviated way, where they can start to cut maybe the interesting bits that are interesting to me, across multiple podcasts.
Well, then the show would be called Panic with Knut. And I wouldn't even be in the show.
Well,
we did that? It was a compliment, Knut.
We questioned before we came in.
And Knut got very upset. Knut's like, we question Knut's being immediately.
Yeah.
I believe that ChatGPT 4 just makes me more valuable. Technology's never scared me. When I watched Downton Abbey, I think of it as a tech show. When I watch Fauda, I think of it as a tech show. Everything to me is like, man, they've already thought of this shit. Like, the movies have this stuff 30 years before it happens. So there's people in Hollywood that are smarter than everybody. The creators. So someone had to create ChatGPT-4 to put the machines together to do all this anyways. So humans are actually, in my opinion, ahead. Therefore, I'm ahead of the computers. But AI is just, no one was expecting it, were they?
There's been talk about this for years.
I get it. But there was no,
but I think
Bitcoin, they keep saying, well, all we need is a killer app.
Right.
AI they were talking about, but no one was saying, oh, just wait. There'll be a killer app. The killer app was the first app.
It's another way to look at this is ChatGPT is really the first interface that brought to life this technology that's been talked about for many years, right?
Okay.
It is the killer app,
it's
in many ways.
It's a killer prompt. It's like search.
Yes. But my question is, do you want to be prompting all day? I mean, I'm not sure that I do.
I haven't.
Right?
I do it so rarely.
Right. So I still think we're very early on because the input, I just don't see people typing prompts all day long. That doesn't sound to me like a whole bunch of innovation where we start typing paragraphs or whatever it is to basically get answers.
So on the dark side, what's the dark side of AI? What's the darkest way it's going to be used? Because isn't that all we're thinking about? I assume the U.S. government's thinking about who's the darkest mind and how they're going to use it. As a smart person, what should we be worried about?
I think it's self-learning systems that can adapt, right? I mean, to me, that is just very scary to think that thought.
First time I saw AutoGPT with Yoni, it was code. There wasn't something that I could interface with.
Right.
He said, come to my basement. This is Yoni. This is like a regular Tuesday.
Yeah, I sat with a friend Friday night, and he walked me through it. He actually installed it on my computer, walked me through the entire thing. It's very much a geek product still, but, I'm sure
the computer was thinking. Again, it felt like Dossie. He was typing, and he goes, watch this. And he would send instructions into the ether, and you could hear the machines just working.
Right.
And it was writing a business plan for us. I gave him an idea, and I said, let's write a business plan. And how would we do this? And what would the marketing look like? And how would you get the influence? It was just doing this shit.
Right.
Like an army being sent out. And it freaked me out.
Yeah. So that's really exciting, in some ways, but also really scary in other ways.
Yeah.
And I don't know how this plays out. I have to tell you, I'm still scratching my head because it's moving so fast.
Yeah.
And every single day I feel like I'm learning something new. This pace of evolution is really what's scary here because we all are starting to feel like we're in a race. And if we don't keep up, if we miss a couple of days, I mean,
I literally have never felt more at peace with missing because it's only 6 months. So I've seen this rodeo. And obviously,
I don't know that you've seen this, Howard.
No, we haven't seen this rodeo, but I've seen the compression. The compression is real. There's different forms of compression. We're in valuation compression because of interest rates, but now there's compression in technology, right? At Downton Abbey, it took decades for the sewing machine to take off. And today, it took 6 months with the right interface for ChatGPT to reach 1 million users with no growth hacking. The growth hack was
a great product.
People used it. Your kids are using it in school. No one told them to use it. They're using it. And they're using it in a way to not get caught. They already figured out that's the only game is don't get caught.
Right.
So they don't take away our toy. And I was telling you about Rachel. It's like, what do you think about TikTok? She goes, we already have workarounds with VPN. So it's like you snooze, you lose. It's all happening.
As I was telling you before, my son, who's a 10th grader, is getting like a 95% in his English class. And he's terrible at it. I mean, don't tell him I said this. He'll probably hear this, but, and he says, it's largely thanks to ChatGPT.
Right.
So I said to him, who's getting below 90? Like I actually want to know who that is because it seems like there's a problem there, right?
But the teachers aren't going to complain because now they can say their students are doing 90s. The system is kind of broken, as we talked about. So knowing that, how do you think about, you're in Fund 2.
Yeah.
Give me one company that excites you. Because you mainly invest in Israel.
We invest about 60% in Israel.
And we are LPs, full disclosure.
Yeah. So 60% of our investments are in Israel. We invested in this one company called FlexSpace, which is really trying to solve this, scenario in which in a hybrid work environment, we're going to be part in office. I mean, I'm still going back. I guess this is a little bit old school now that with AI. But in a hybrid environment where, there's obviously a big push now to coming back into the office for a few days a week. FlexSpace takes all the inventory from the FlexSpace providers out there, the WeWorks of the world, brings it online, and allows enterprises now to consume office space almost like hotels, almost like units, right? So, for example, if you have a team that is traveling to Chicago and needs an office for a day, we are able to give it across FlexSpace providers, integrated into the employees' calendars, so they can together choose which office space they want, and the employers have one contract that they sign on a month-to-month basis, depending on how they want to consume the actual service from us.
By seat or by office?
By seat or by office, yeah, depending on how they want it.
Pretty genius. How old is that company?
So that company is about 2 years old.
That's in Fund 1.
That's in Fund 1 and Fund 2. We preceded it. We worked very closely with the founder.
I'm an investor. Okay. So flexspace.com?
Flexspace.com. Flexspace is a .com.
It's okay. People will find it.
Flexspace,
or I'll
Google
put it in the notes.
Yeah.
So how often are you going to Israel?
So we try to go to Israel once a quarter. And, either together or separately, but we love spending time with the ecosystem there, and we have, a lot of really close and great relationships with the venture community as well. So it's so fun when we hang out there.
All right. Well, this has been great. Knut, any other questions?
No, I mean, you guys have covered a lot of stuff.
Covered a lot of ground. Now we've got a base for which to talk about R Squared. So R Squared is just you and Roy.
It's the two of us.
And you're writing seed checks.
Pre-seed and seed, yeah. Investing out of Fund 2, which is a $32 million fund. R Squared is a little different than most pre-seed funds in that it's an extension of our angel investing experience. We're operators at heart. We roll up our sleeves and we spend a lot of times with the teams that we support.
And if you were to say like a category, what gets you the most excited? When you see a founder, how do you know? Like when do you know? We're always wrong, but when you've had that feeling, what is it?
Look, we look for strong domain expertise. We look for deep problems that have big markets. We look for a founding team that is hungry, driven. They are in it for the long run, right? Yeah. Very easy for us to spot that, I think, in the DNA coming out of Israel, just because of our Israeli orientation. My co-founder in the fund, my partner, and I are from Israel. And, when we see teams coming from those markets, we obviously can identify fairly quickly. But we funded a great deal of, companies here in the United States. And we have some great companies in our portfolio that we absolutely love. And
you're having fun doing it.
It's been a blast.
It's not for everybody, but it seems like you're really enjoying it. So you don't have the urge to start something, or do you?
We don't have the urge. Personally, look, I look around. I know how difficult it is, and I know the amount of sweat, equity you have to put into it, and time away from the family, and I think where I am in life right now, it's harder to give that up.
So it's R Squared Ventures. Roy Rubin, thanks, man. Thanks for coming to town.
Thank you.
You are listening to Panic with Friends. Knut and I get together with people like Roy, investors, traders, entrepreneurs, founders, mainly in tech, but obviously we love the financial world too, trying to get a little bit ahead of the world, help people find and ride trends. You can search my name, Howard Lindzon, or Panic with Friends on Spotify, YouTube, Google, Apple. You will see my name. You subscribe, tell your friends, and you will get a podcast. You won't have to do any work. You'll get a podcast every week. Thanks, Knut, and we'll see everybody next week.
Howard Lindzon is the founder and general partner at Social Leverage. All opinions expressed by Howard and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Social Leverage or StockTwits. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. Guests may maintain positions in securities discussed in this podcast.